Opinions are important, of course, but the act of mistaking opinion for fact is a recipe for hazard, and so deliberate effort to encourage others to make this mistake is especially dishonest. I don't know for certain if this is an official fallacy, but I have been encountering it so often that I figure surely it must be. And if so, it's probably the fallacy of opinionated language, or perhaps biased language. Consider if you were to see three people, one exhibiting firm behavior, one exhibiting obstinate behavior, and one exhibiting pig-headed behavior, how would you tell which is which? It cannot be done, because these three terms all describe exactly the same behavior. The only difference between these terms is the opinion of the person using them. Firm conveys approval, pig-headed conveys disapproval, and obstinate is neutral. A fair question would be, do you object to said party's obstinate behavior? An unfair, quite loaded question would instead be, don't you have a problem with someone being so pig-headed? This is a loaded question because it relies on an unwarranted assumption that the person being asked would indeed characterize the behavior in question as pig-headed. The act of asking, don't you object to pig-headed behavior, is the same as asking, don't you object to obstinate behavior you object to? Of course I object to pig-headed behavior, or I would not call it pig-headed. But by asking me to describe it as such, you are not asking me to venture an opinion, but to adopt one. You're not asking me what my opinion is, you're trying to coax me into adopting yours. How do you figure that the kind of behavior you regard as pig-headed, I will regard the same way? Why do you assume that I will disapprove of the same thing you disapprove of? The act of saying I object to pig-headed behavior is redundant, and so the question, don't you object to such pig-headed behavior, is a trap. Don't you object to such pig-headed behavior? No. Oh, so then you admit that it's pig-headed. See? It's a trap. It's not quite the same as weasel words, the objective of which is to confuse and obfuscate with vague language. Deliberately vague language is one thing, biased language is quite another. A given argument can be an example of both, but they are nonetheless not the same thing. If you see two people, one being childish and the other exhibiting childlike behavior, how do you tell which one is which? Do you want people to favor the continuation of a certain practice just because it has been going on a long time? Call it time-honored, and so commit an appeal to tradition. Do you want people to adopt a certain practice or program just because it has not been going on a long time? Call it revolutionary, and so commit an appeal to novelty. Do you want the general public to oppose a certain program that requires government funding just because you and or your sponsors would profit more without it? Call it wasteful or reckless, and be sure to withhold any other details about why you call it that, lest you end up aiding the efforts of the general public to decide for ourselves. Our assessment might disagree with yours after all. Do you want people to accept your religion's spiel uncritically? Call it a message of love or a religion of peace, in spite of the fact that in either case you are in fact talking about unquestioning dogmatic acceptance. Personally, I'm wondering where to find the religion that lends itself to skeptical scrutiny and holds up under it. Do you want people to accept your religion's mandates unquestioningly? Call them teachings, and cherry-pick the less objectionable ones until you have people in the habit of accepting them. Then bring out the more authoritarian ones. Do you object to being asked a certain question? Call it gay. Do you want people to just accept certain restrictions on their behavior? Call the list of restrictions a moral code or a source of moral guidance. Call the failure to accept them libertine, immoral, or depraved, and call the impetus to carry out the behavior in question a lustful appetite. Did something highly improbable happen that you are really glad about? Call it a miracle. Do you want people to relax their scrutiny when it comes to your spiel? Call them close-minded until they do. Don't like a certain set of government regulations because they inhibit the unrelenting profit of you and or your sponsors? Call them big government. Do you want society to accept restrictions on homosexual rights? Call them accountability. Do you want society to oppose a congressional effort to enforce federal regulations, the violation of which led to the explosion of an oil rig, the deaths of several workers and millions of marine animals and plants, and the ruination of dozens of coastal local economies? Call the effort a shakedown. Do you object to paying taxes? Call it stealing or punishing success. Don't like brooking disagreement? Call it dividing the house with petty infighting. Do you want local business owners to furnish your organization with regular kickbacks, lest their failure to do so compel you to send your thugs to rough them up and break some of their stuff? Call the kickbacks protection money. Don't like labor unions? Call them big labor. Call their members union thugs. Call their leaders union bosses. Yeah, say? Those big government thugs nabbed Capone. You probably get the idea.